Welcome to the College Football Show. We got so much to talk about, jam-packed show today because Dabo Swinney went in on Ole Miss, and we got to discuss it from beginning to end so we can understand it in the way that's not just surface level, because there have been some really bad takes on this. We got to talk about Deion Sanders finding his players and why it's honestly bigger than that, and how it also translates to the Darian Mensah case where he's leaving Duke now to go to Miami, and they were able to reach a settlement, which I told you was going to change college football forever. And speaking of college, changing college football forever, Kurt Cignetti in Indiana. This story from the last year, with them winning the national championship, is honestly one of the best stories in sports history. But it also may be bad for college football. And I'm going to explain to you why. Hold your horses. This isn't a hot take. It's just facts. It's reality of the situation. I got to give you my way too early top 25, which is, of course, way too early. And we're going to see, because I'm an honesty broker. College football is honesty broker. So, of course, we will revisit this in a little bit. We got to go back to what President Donald Trump talked about with the Army-Navy game. And Big Ten schedules came out today. ACC schedules just came out, and we got to dissect those. We got a video coming out on that tomorrow, so make sure you check back for that. And we got to talk about, because there's a lot of people that have asked me about what's going on with my son in the transfer portal. And, of course, all of that is going on. And I am George Wrighster, former NFL player, college football analyst as well. So you guys make sure that you guys like, share, subscribe, get notifications, and because sharing is caring, on one of the fastest growing college football channels on all of YouTube. And most importantly, I am college football's honesty broker. So I'm going to be the guy that's going to guide you through this, tell you the truth when other people have agendas and everything else. You get the real here. But now it is time to go. Yes, we've added sound effects around this joint. So we're going to see how this goes. But we are going to start today with Dabo Swinney. And Dabo Swinney, he's a man who I've had a chance to interview. Going to get him on the interview tour again this year. And this is a man who stands on business and stands on principles. And him versus Ole Miss, surrounding the transfer portal and everything else, is just a fascinating story, because Dabo Swinney was looked at as a guy who he wouldn't go into transfer portal, wouldn't adapt to college football. Well, when I interviewed him last year, one of the things that he pointed out was, I'll go in the portal. I have no problem with going to the portal. But what he was not committed to doing, which he said he would never do, he will not push players into the portal, which I love, which is fantastic. And then the second thing that he said that he wouldn't do is sacrifice graduation and these kids' personal growth for wins. I love that. But now with this situation with Cal transfer linebacker and Ole Miss, things got a little tricky. And there's a quote from HBO's The Wire that a man's got to have a code. And that's from Omar Little. And that got me to wondering, is Dabo Swinney college football's Omar Little? And honestly, that's a comparison that I never thought I would make in a billion years. But last week, the Clemson head coach, Dabo, he held a 19-minute press conference that it honestly felt like a whole lot of Omar testifying at the wire, talking about the Barksdales and Stringer Bell and everybody else. And then he went into detail about how Cal transfer linebacker Luke Farrelly, how he had committed to Clemson after he entered the transfer portal. And then 16 days later, entered the portal again with Ole Miss as his next destination. And if you listen to Dabo, he talked about that Ole Miss is not a staffer, not anybody else, but their head coach, Pete Golding, was texting Farrelly directly while he was enrolled at Clemson. And then he accused Golding of acknowledging that Farrelly was signed and then asking about his buyout, how much it was. And then, Dabo, he then asked his administrators to communicate a warning shot to Ole Miss, telling them to cease communication or get turned in. And people looked at that like, oh, look at Dabo being a snitch and all of this stuff. But you got to go back to what Dabo Swinney said about the transfer portal when people asked him at the end of the season if he was going to use the transfer portal at all. Dabo was like, yeah, we're going to use the portal, but we're going to do it the right way. We're not going to tamper with players. We're not going to do any of these things. We are going to abide by the rules. And there are a lot of people that look at that and they're like, oh man, everybody's doing it and this and that. But isn't that the point of being a person of principle? Is that even if it is allegedly to your detriment, that you're going to stand on business and not just do what everybody else is doing? Like, isn't that the definition of character and what we want, like, to teach our kids and to teach and for our coaches to teach our young men who are going to grow up to be leaders in the world to stand on principles and do what's right and follow the rules? You know, what happened to rule of law and all of this stuff, right? And yes, we're living in the wild, wild west of college football, but there have to be some guardrails. And if nobody is willing to stand up and tell the truth and do the right thing, we're never going to get it. So all you fans that sit up there and complain, oh, college football is broken and nobody has any rules. They're buying players, they're tampering, all this stuff. How can you look at Dabo and be upset? And the crazy part of this whole situation is that Dabo having the administration talk to Ole Miss actually might have got Golding to up the offer to Farrelly. And then Dabo says that Farrelly's agent then tried to use the situation to extort another year on his already existing deal out of Clemson. And you know Dabo, if he stood on his principles about that, you don't think he gonna stand on his principles about this? And he told the agent to shove it. He told him, and then turned in Ole Miss to the NCAA. And then, not only that, he went public about it. He was even keeping Farrelly's roster page up on the team website with a link to the news conference. That's standing on business. But here's the cool part about it, because Golding is a first-time head coach, and he's trying to, navigate his way back to the college football playoff like he got gifted this year. And Dabo's like, I don't even want Golden fired. He just wants enforceable rules, which is what all of these coaches, they publicly say that they want, but none of them have been willing to stick to their guns or stick their neck out and have their own personal misdeeds or potential misdeeds by somebody on their staff getting dragged out into the light, whether it's public allegations or accusations or something else. And here's what Dabo Swinney had to say if you didn't get it.
Yeah, like there's tampering and then there's blatant tampering. Tampering 101 is when you're talking to kids who aren't in the portal. Tampering 201 is when you've already negotiated the deal with the kids not in the portal. Tampering 301 is when you got a kid who's gone in the portal, signed somewhere, moved there, gone to classes, and you're texting them while they're in class. That's like a whole nother level of tampering. And it's total hypocrisy, because all this is going on while they, on the other side, are trying to fight their defensive end from going in the portal. They have accused publicly others of tampering with their roster and their players while they are over here tampering. All right, so this is just a really sad state of affairs, and it's, to me, we have a broken system. And
Dabo is 100% right. And we all know that there need to be guardrails on this. But the problem is nobody's willing to sacrifice anything for that. Nobody's willing to sacrifice it. Are you willing to sacrifice a player out of the portal for it? Dabo is. Are you willing to, for all the complaining and the being and moaning about college football, oh, it's changed, there's no loyalty, there's no contracts supposed to be contracts and all of this stuff. You got to have that same energy. You have to risk something. Think about the history of the world, the history of America. Think about the civil rights movement. Think about the Civil War. Think about every single time that great things have happened, people have been willing to risk something. Free agency in the NFL, the Ed O'Bannon versus the NCAA. Anytime somebody had to be willing to risk something. And look at Ole Miss, and Dabo just said it. Ole Miss going into the playoff. You know, the plucky underdog role. Lane Kiffin abandoning them to Baton Rouge, tampering with their players, all of this stuff. It was a feel-good story. So then you go do it too? Because there's definitely a portion of college football fans that are calling Dabo soft for calling Pete Golding out. And then Dabo even goes on to talk about that coaches have been texting him about it, like, yeah, man, this isn't cool. And he called them out. He was like, yo, say something. Don't just stand idly by. And this is why it's like the wire, because he said, if you don't want to say something, don't text me about it. Just sit over there and shut up. So whether you are Ole Miss or whether you are anybody else, you better look out because Omar's coming. That whistle coming at you, man. And honestly, Dabo is 100% right, man. 100% right. We need rules in college football and enforcement. And until there is enforcement, people will just be running wild with everything that is going on, the schools included. Next thing that we got to talk about is Deion Sanders. So Deion Sanders, I just put up the his fine schedule that he is now going to be enforcing on his players. And I'm just here to say, Deion, don't fine me. I'm just here so I don't get fined, Marshawn Lynch style. Now, in a team meeting this week, Deion Sanders, he presented a new player accountability plan, and he emphasized that since players are now receiving significant NIL compensation, that they got to be held to a professional standard. Now, I can attest to this, that the NFL keeps players partially in line by fining them, whether it's illegal hits, being late for meetings, anything like that. And it's the same system. It looks like it's coming to college football. Like prime example, I remember I got fined 3 significant times in the NFL. No, well, 4. Once I got fined for my socks. I got fined $5,000 because I wasn't showing enough white in my socks. And there's a whole story about this because in the NFL, they want the dress code a certain way. And if you're not showing enough white in your socks, showing too much white, different colored cleats, any of that stuff, you are subject to be fined. $5,000 fine for that. Got a $10,000 fine for a personal foul. I grabbed the face mask in a complete accident, but that one got reduced to $2,500. Okay, fine. Then I also got fined for wearing the wrong T-shirt in pre-game. There was nobody in the stadium. It was Christmas Day. I had a Grinch T-shirt on. I got fined $5,000 for that. And then another time, and then so those are just the on-game, on-field fines. But then I also got fined. I mean, I've seen teammates fined. I saw Donovan Darius get fined $75,000 for a hit. But speaking of these fines that Deion Sanders is talking about in the NFL, you are fined for being late to meetings. Now, the NFL has collective bargaining, which why this matters. And the NFL, they cap how much you can fine for a missed meeting, a late meeting, any of that stuff, right? A whole missed day, any of that, how much there's a maximum that can be fined. The way it's not arbitrary because it's what? Collectively bargained. So Deion Sanders arbitrarily chose these amounts of money. Now, mind you, for being late to practice, $500 fine. That might not be much if you are Travis Hunter and you're making that type of money. But if you are making but if you are one of the lower paid players on the roster, that is a lot of money. That is a lot of money if you are one of the lower paid players on the roster. Therefore, it's arbitrary. And this is why collective bargaining needs to happen. Uh, $1,000 for being late to treatment, $2,500 no show to practice. So this got me to thinking a few things. First of all, I was like, is this a big problem on your team, Deion? I generally hope that it is not. So that's the first thing, because if you got to keep players in line just with this, that's a whole nother situation. And going back to the NFL for a second, I remember that there was a time, because you could be fined up to like $8,000 for a missed meeting. But then if you're late to a meeting, you could actually end up being fined more depending on how late you are. Like, I remember I was late for a meeting one time. I was going to be so late it was going to exceed the $8,000 fine. So I missed the damn meeting on purpose. I was like, "Oh, I'm not going to that meeting. I will wait till the meeting over with and just take my $8,000 fine." And we are here. This is the world that we live in. And this goes to the Dabo Swinney thing, to the Darian Mensah thing that we're going to talk about in a few minutes, because it is right here on our doorsteps. Because coaches are doing it at other places than Colorado, and this is bigger than Colorado. And the NCAA has been finding individual players for years. They even made Memphis basketball player James Wiseman donate $11,500 to charity. They made him donate it to charity because his head coach, Penny Hardaway, paid his mom's moving expenses. And speaking of Penny Hardaway, though, he's one of the only coaches that we have on record saying that he fined players like Aaron Bradshaw $3,000 here and there to help motivate him to show up on time and abide by team rules. Now, mind you, I have no problem with a fine system, none at all. I think it is appropriate because this is big boy business. This ain't high school business. This is professional sports. As I know that everybody wants to call them kids and everything. Yes, they are still young adults. They're still kids. But this is professional business. It is professional for the media. It is professional for the athletic directors, for the coaches, for everybody else. And once you start getting paid, expectations change. It's just the truth. But now, here's where it gets tricky, because there are some issues surrounding the legality of the fines that Deion Sanders is talking about. Because the thought was that the fines are deducted from players' NIL earnings. But the University of Colorado said that the fines are completely independent of a player's NIL licensing agreement and are permissible by the NCAA. And that the money received from the fines will go back to the operating funds for Colorado's athletic department. What? Then you got Darren Heitner, the lawyer who represented Darian Mensah and a lot of other people in cases, and who finds himself on the player side of a lot of NIL disputes. Said, if players are employees in all but name, in terms of being fined for tardiness, required to attend, and then here's the biggest one, subject to performance obligations. That means that they can cut you, force you into the portal, not renew your NIL deal, any of that. Then they deserve employee protections, which is why you have to collectively bargain. But anyways, he goes that you can't have it both ways, because either these are real licensing deals and you can't find somebody for being late to practice, or admit that it's compensated labor, which is what I've been saying. There is a big difference between pay for play, which is 99% of the money that college athletes are getting is pay for play. Name, image, and likeness is completely different. This is why there has to be a cap on it as well. And people are like, well, you shouldn't cap people's earnings. You do it in professional sports all the time. NBA, NHL, MLB, all of them cap earnings. LeBron James can make a finite amount of money from the NBA. Uh, in the college, I'm sorry, in the NHL, there's a finite amount of money that Ovechkin can make. There is a finite amount of money in the NFL how much Aaron Rodgers can make. But off the field, there is an infinite amount of money. And there is a defined, like there is a difference between it. And the owners are not allowed to give players additional compensation outside of it, like college players are able to get. This makes no sense. So on one hand, you got them trying to act like players are employees when they're not, because employees get protections out in the workplace. They do. They get workers' compensation. They get injury protections, discrimination protections, all sorts of things that employees get. So you can't have it both ways. And then there's no enforcement either, because you got conflicting opinions out here on social media, and it begs the question: what if a player then refuses to pay the fine? What's the recourse? What happens when a player that isn't making solid money on the roster finds themselves hit with the same $1,000 fine that the star lineman gets, or the quarterback? Because I have been in situations. I was in a situation after my first year in the league. There was a guy that I knew who was a third-round draft pick. He was broke, and he needed to borrow money. And you got a lot of these college players that are broke right now. They are living paycheck to paycheck and getting paid $5,000 a month, $10,000 a month, $20,000 a month, and are broke at the end of the month. They're living paycheck to paycheck. Now, granted, I talk to the guys that I mentor, get them to understand things are completely different, but everybody doesn't listen. Everybody doesn't participate. And this is why this matters, and why collective bargaining is a 100% must. You have to have rules, and everybody is tired of these lawsuits. You got Darian Mensah suing Duke. Duke suing Darian Mensah. Yeah, Washington getting ready to file suit against Damon Williams. You got Trinidad Chambliss filing suit. Well, the school filing suit on behalf of him for his eligibility rules. You got professional players going to go play at Alabama in basketball and BYU and other schools, because there's no general rules and there's no enforcement. This is why you need collective bargaining, because then when somebody tries to come from another league or do something else that's against your collective bargaining rules, which everybody has agreed to, it won't be permitted, and the lawsuits will get just thrown out. And you got to think about it. The ACC, Big 10, Big 12, ACC, they all have to willing to cede power to one entity to negotiate on everybody's behalf. And I've heard people, as a retort to that, they would never give up power. They wouldn't have a choice, man. This is the way it is done. And we already agree and live by the same rules in other places. We know what the targeting rules are. Everybody lives by them. We live by the same clock rules. Every game is 60 minutes. We live by play clock rules. We live by, everybody agrees on who the national champion is. We live by a lot of rules. So this could be no different. And we're going to see how the NCAA handles a lot of these things. All right. Next thing up, and why this matters a lot. We got to talk about Darian Mensah, because Darian Mensah is now in a situation where he is now being allowed to leave Duke to go to Miami. And mind you, when we started talking about this a week ago, so Darian Mensah he was attempting to enter the transfer portal right before the portal was opening. And people were like, no, he shouldn't be allowed to get in, and this and that and all this. I'm like, why shouldn't the kid be allowed to get in the transfer portal? Now, he was under contract with Duke. He was under contract, and he decided that he was going to hop in the transfer portal. And people were like, oh my gosh, this and that. Now, he's under contract, so should he be allowed to leave? No, right? But the issue is with these contracts is that there is no buyout. Like there is no select set of rules surrounding it. And this is where the problem comes into play. Is that Darian Mensah, well, that Miami, they were desperate for a quarterback. And Miami being desperate for a quarterback, they said, we got to go find one. So they said we don't even care how much it costs to get Darian Mensah out of his contract. We will get him and we will pay that money. So Duke was like, we not letting you out without it. So, and he was under a 2-year, 8 mil, up to, the key is up to $8 million deal. Now, mind you, you have to assume that the fact that he was second in the nation in passing, through the second or third most touchdown passes in the whole country, got Duke to win the ACC, that those things would have upped that up to close to that $4 million a year, which is what is essentially, what it was thought to be. So if he got up to that, Duke then sues him, doesn't allow him to get in the transfer portal. There was a hearing on February the 2nd about whether he was going to be in the portal, but they came to a resolution today, which then allows him for the last day to be able to register the classes for Miami so then he can participate in spring ball. So the only way that Duke would be able to do that or be willing to do that, because they're going to be left without a quarterback and significantly, and they lost their top wide receiver as well, who's going to Miami. There has to be some remedy. And so one of the ideas that you can have is that players then have buyouts in their contracts the same way that coaches do. So you have a guy like Dan Lanning. Buyout is $20 million right now. The next year, it's $20 million. Other coaches have descending buyouts where it starts high, 20 million, then 15, then 8, then 4, then 2, then 1, depending on the year if they so choose to leave and break their contract. And this is why I said that this Darian Mensah case would change college football forever, because him essentially being able to get out of a contract that didn't have a specific buyout, that means either one or two things is going to happen. Either we're going to get closer to collective bargaining, which is the only possible way forward to stop all of these lawsuits and this nonsense, or we're going to get to a point and that's probably the long-term play. But in the short term, what we're going to get is we're going to get buyouts. And the buyouts are probably going to be high. And players are going to be compensated even more for buyouts. And schools are going to have to stand on business and say, nah, we're not doing this contract without a buyout. We're not. So if that means that you got to go somewhere else, go ahead. And we might just take you from them later. Because right now the players are living in a era where they get all the benefit, getting money, scholarship, all of this stuff, but then don't have to necessarily uphold their end of the bargain outside of playing football. That's not the way big boy world works. So stuff has to absolutely change. The next thing that and you guys, make sure you guys put your comments down in the bottom. I'm sorry, down in the comment section. Make sure that you guys like, subscribe, share, get notifications, and tell a friend about the best college football show and the place that you get the truth about everything. The next thing up, we got to talk about Curt Cignetti. Lord have mercy, because Curt Cignetti has lit college football on fire. And honestly, his story with Indiana, one of the greatest college football stories of all time. The losingest program in college football turns itself around and wins a national championship in 2 years without 5-star players. Well, and it sounds like it's good for the game. And on one hand, it is, but it ain't good for everybody, because most college football fan bases, their coaching staffs and administrations, Curt Cignetti in Indiana winning is the best thing that could have ever happened. You know why? It gives them hope. Hope. Because hope is the thing that we need out in the world more than anything else. If you don't have hope, you are doomed. But hope can be dangerous, especially for college football fans. Because hope changes to delusional college football fans. It changes from what's possible to what's expected. Think about that. It changes what's possible to what's now expected. So now people are expecting a 2 to 3 year turnaround to win a national championship. That is unrealistic. This was a once in a lifetime story. This is the miracle. This is, Buster Douglas beating Mike Tyson. This doesn't happen. And the other reason why it's dangerous, because if the school with the most losses in NCAA history can take over college football through common sense scouting, solid coaching, staff continuity, and administrative buy-in, then your school can do it too. Right, North Carolina State, right, Kentucky, right, Kansas. Think about it. Schools that you would never associate with being national championships or national championship contenders in football, all of a sudden they got a North Star. They got somebody to point to and look up in the sky and be like, wish upon a star. We can do that too. and that's where the hope can turn to delusion. Because not every school shouldn't feel that way. Because some fan bases, Indiana winning a national championship is one of the worst things that could have possibly happened, because it murdered every single excuse that has been built up by the current powers that be. Because we were told you can't win if your blue chip ratio ain't over 50%. Because before this season started, Texas head coach Steve Sarkisian said a 16-0 undefeated season is unlikely to ever happen again. And not only did it happened at Indiana. And truthfully, it was a logical observation with the portal, players being spread out, everything else. But then Indiana went and did it. And how they did it with a strength of schedule that was one spot below Texas. Now, all of a sudden, the logical observations, they look like an excuse for Texas underachieving their number one AP poll preseason ranking. Look over there at USC. USC's Lincoln Riley has been out here preaching patience, saying that after year 4, because he's going into year 5 there, his program overhaul could create a championship window, that it's now open. Now, if you're a USC fan, maybe you could have swallowed that idea in a vacuum and been like, okay, cool, I get it. It takes a while. This is the real world. Knowing that you just came off a 9-win season, you got your quarterback returning, and you're bringing in one of the best ranked recruiting classes in modern recruiting history. But Kurt Cignetti did it in year 1, made the playoff, and then won it all in year 2. So now you got to turn around and explain to them same fans why it takes you 5 years. And if you don't win it this year, or you don't even make the playoff, how that's going to work? Like, how can Indiana be 5th in the country in total penalties while USC is 63rd? Is discipline something only taught in year 5? Indiana, they won with 2 different quarterbacks. Last year, a different quarterback. This year, a different quarterback. And won a Heisman Trophy. And if they look good with Josh Hoover next year under center, what's going to be the excuse at Florida State for not being able to adequately replace Jordan Travis? Indiana is winning with values and discipline, in addition to some heavy NIL investment, which a lot of other people are doing too, with little return. They're using the portal wisely. And do we think that Clemson fans aren't looking at Indiana and asking, why didn't they take their values-based approach and embrace the portal several years ago? I mean, do we really think that Penn State gives up on James Franklin without the rise of Indiana and Kurt Cignetti? Probably not, right? Do we think that famously impatient Auburn is going to be more patient with their 3rd head coach in 5 years if they don't see immediate results? No. Kurt Signetti has blue bloods. They're on notice. And Indiana has 80% of college football fans asking, why not us? Why not us? And also, why not now? And then the other 20% is got them asking, they got to take an internal look. They're like, what's wrong with us? What are we doing wrong? Just reality. All right, the next thing that we got to talk about is my way too early top 25, people. Yes, this is way, 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 way too early, but you know what? It's fun to do anyway. So y'all can look at this and be excited and tell me how great this is, because I'll wait on the applause. You're welcome. You're welcome. Best top 25 that there is around preseason. And it was funny because I had some people where I put it out on Twitter and people were like, oh, George, you always put Oregon first. Actually, that's completely not true. That is actually false. I haven't put Oregon as number one in preseason rankings in maybe once in the last 4 or 5 years, maybe. I had Clemson number one. I had Oregon number 5 coming into the season, which proved about right. They were somewhere in between 3 and 5 this year. I'm just saying. But they returned so many starters and all this. The only other team I considered putting at number one was Notre Dame, because CJ Carr is returning. They returned some really good DBs and defensive line, and Marcus Freeman's a hell of a coach and everything. Like, Notre Dame could win a national championship next year. Ohio State, they return a lot. Quarterback Jeremiah Smith, they return a lot, but they're also going to be replacing their offensive coordinator, who's now the head coach at Tulane, hell of a recruiter as well. They're replacing him with Arthur Smith. Now, Grant, with Pittsburgh Steelers head offensive coordinator for this last year, former Atlanta Falcons head coach, I'm not a huge fan of Arthur Smith's offensive coordination in the NFL, but maybe it works in college football. Who knows? We'll see. I got questions for Ryan Day though. Another team that people were questioning me about was Miami at number 11. So I was debating between Miami at 4 and Miami at 18. So I cut the baby in half because Darian Mensah was not committed to them yet, and we had a February 2nd court date, so we didn't know what was going to happen. So I was like, we'll put them in the middle of that amount. So I believe that. So I would probably put Miami around number 4 right now with Darian Mensah and that wide receiver coming over too, because that's going to be a hell of a football team. Indiana fans are very upset. Very upset. They should be a top 5 team. When teams lose as much as Indiana did, and then Indiana, they look like they did a wonderful job in the transfer portal again. But this is too small of a sample size to believe. I mean, you're already getting credit for being number 7. You're not going to win the national championship every year. I'm sorry to break it to you, Indiana fans. I know you're on high right now and you can't possibly hear anything negative. But being a top 10 team in the preseason, that means you got a shot. That means you got a shot. This is way too early ranking. So this means that everybody believes that I believe in what Indiana is doing. People were shocked at Michigan at number 9. Do you know what their coach is? Kyle Whittingham? Dude is a dog. You better believe in Kyle Whittingham. I'm just telling you that. And then he will get this crew together. And Michigan is already crazy talented. They added players in the portal. What do you think is going to happen at Michigan? Duh. And I feel like I am the only preseason way too early that appropriately ranked the SEC. We got Georgia, Texas, Texas A&M in the top 10. That's it. 3 in the top 10. That's it. And then you got LSU, hell of a transfer portal haul, and plus on a talented roster. Ole Miss at 15. So you got 5 in the top 15. Reasonable. Then we got Oklahoma. They kept their same offensive coordinator, so I'm not sure why we think anything's going to be better. Alabama lost a lot, and we got to see if they can block anybody, even though they got Adrian Clem as their offensive coordinator now, which should be a significant improvement. And we got Missouri at number 21. But I'm not sold on Austin Simmons yet, but they're doing some decent things over there at Ole Miss. So we got 8 SEC teams. Feels appropriate for the second best team in college, second best conference in college football. We're not falling victim to it again over here on Unafraid Show. It's not. The Big Ten is the best conference, and it's reflected in the rankings. And then we got teams like Texas A&M, Texas Tech at number 6, BYU at 10. People are sleeping on Washington and USC, which I got 12 and 13. Iowa, if they can put together some offense, Lord have mercy, they are going to be a significant problem. Virginia is much improved. People are sleeping on Houston, and people are sleeping on Arizona as well. With Noah Fafita, they bounced back. They've recruited well. It's going to be a good football team. But you guys, make sure that y'all like, subscribe, get notifications, tell a friend about the show, and most importantly, share. Peace out. We will catch you guys later. Come back tomorrow for the Big Ten rankings.